Welcome back. Donald Trump drawing comparisons between the UK's Brexit decision and support for his own presidential campaign here in the U.S. Trump suggesting that voters in both countries are skeptical of open borders and praising the Supreme Court's split decision this week that blocked President Obama's controversial executive action on immigration. Joining me right now is Stephen Miller. He is senior policy advisor for the Trump campaign. And Stephen, it is a pleasure to have you on the program.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you.
Do you think there are similarities between what just went on in the UK to what's happening in America?
Absolutely. The similarities are actually quite extraordinary. If you look at the Brexit campaign and if you look at the Leave campaign, their central issue was the ability for Britain to control its own borders. Because immigration fundamentally is an issue that affects every aspect of people's lives, and especially for working people. It affects housing, it affects schools, it affects hospitals, it affects wages, it affects neighborhood security. And that was a driving issue, as well as the ability to make trade deals that are good for Britain, as well as the ability to make decisions at the local rather than the international level. Those are the same issues that are animating this campaign here in America.
And why is that issue so important? Why? Connect the dots for us. I mean, I know that there is worry and concern over foreigners taking people's jobs, but there's also a worry about security.
Yes, in both. And in the case of the security issue, you've obviously seen tragically here in the United States a number of incidents in recent years in which individuals linked to immigration in one way or another have gone on to commit atrocities inside the United States. And that is certainly one of the issues driving it here in America, is an issue over security. But it's also a quality of life issue. I think people will be surprised to learn that since 1965, the United States has admitted 59 million immigrants. That's a level unprecedented, really, I would say, in world history. And the effects of that on wages, on incomes, on job security has been profound. And so you've seen through that, as well as a number of trade deals, an economic dislocation and a social dislocation for many working people. And that includes many immigrant people. That includes many people who themselves have arrived very recently, who are the first people to be affected by newcomers. So all Americans, regardless of where they come from, will benefit from establishing stronger border control.
So talk to us about Trump's immigration policy. You are integral to that immigration policy, and have done a lot of work on immigration, as you worked with Senator Jeff Sessions over the years. People are wondering how Trump would balance out controlling borders, ensuring we know who's coming in and out of the country, but also not being too nationalistic, and perhaps creating trade wars, as well as creating a closed society.
Well, the United States is in no danger of becoming a closed society. We are the most open society in the world. We have the most generous immigration policy. We have the world's largest trade deficit. We have the least amount of border control. In fact, what's actually striking is that even though Britain couldn't exercise self-determination because of their membership in the EU, Britain still had a greater amount of border control than the United States does, which is a really astonishing statement, and it's a profound indictment of our political class. So moderating our trade policies and immigration policies to serve the interests of the people living here today will simply be a move towards the historical position of most civilized countries, which is that if you're making a trade deal, if you're making an immigration deal, you have to first and foremost look out for your own workers.
Trump made some comments this weekend while he was in Scotland, obviously went there for the golf course, and yet it was the perfect timing to be there. He ended up giving a press conference on Brexit. Was that planned, by the way, that he say, okay, I want to be there when the Brexit happens?
Well, there was certainly an awareness. There was certainly an awareness that if the timing of the trip would place it right after Brexit, which we thought would be the responsible thing to do, considering that you don't want to come in right before the vote and distract from it. So, I mean, it was a long-planned trip, but there was certainly awareness inside the campaign about where the timing would fall.
Okay, so he made comments over the weekend talking about the Muslim ban. Do you want to clarify, has his tone changed on a Muslim ban? Should he become president?
I think what you've seen is the policy outlined in his speech that he gave after the Orlando shooting. And that has been that we are going to focus on suspending migration from countries with a proven link to terrorism until a better vetting procedure can be put in place. And we've seen not just dozens, not just scores, but hundreds of terror-linked individuals that have ended up in the United States as a result of our immigration policies.
Okay, so he's talking about specific countries. That's where the vigilance will be in terms of a Muslim ban.
The most effective way to screen out dangerous individuals linked to radical Islam is to focus on countries where they know they live.
Okay. By the way, the other news headline this past week was obviously the Supreme Court in a split decision essentially knocking down the president's immigration reform, which was done by executive action. Your thoughts on that?
Well, the fact that it's a 4-4 split underscores really what is at stake for America in the November election. That will be eventually, or could be, relitigated. And you could see a new effort to come up with a different result, because all that happened was they kicked it back down and they upheld the circuit court ruling as a result of that decision. If you get a fifth justice on there that Hillary Clinton appoints, they could rule in favor of the president's actions, which would mean that any president now or in the future could unilaterally suspend all immigration rules on a whim, and then effectively you would have no borders in America.
Wow. You know what really resonated with me? The fact that President Obama did away with the Pledge of Allegiance to America. Now when immigrants come in, they don't have to pledge, I pledge my allegiance to America. They don't have to sign that document. I was looking at documents from my own great-grandparents that when they denounced the King of Italy, I pledge my support to America. Immigrants don't have to do that anymore. Okay, real quick, there's a poll out today that shows that Donald Trump is way behind Hillary Clinton. There's also been some debate amongst, obviously, the GOP. What's the strategy for Trump going into the conventions, going into this election to gain an upper hand?
Well, you have a couple things going on. First of all, you have on the fundraising side, you've seen that obviously you have some big numbers coming in for the campaign that will allow us to compete in the ad war. Hillary Clinton has spent many tens upon tens upon tens of millions of dollars in negative advertising. But most importantly, what the American people care about is the message. And you're going to see a big message appealing to working people who have been oftentimes the victims of globalization to say, we don't think the big banks, we don't think the multinationals, we don't think the transnationals should be deciding how my life goes, how my family's life goes, how my community's life goes. That's the Hillary Clinton agenda of globalization. We're going to focus on real results for working people.
And he's going to stick to those issues.
Yes.
All right, Stephen, we're going to be watching.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. Stephen Miller joining us this morning. Shockwaves, meanwhile, felt around the world as Great Britain votes to leave the European Union. Many now bracing for what comes next. A member of the European Parliament will join me next live as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Back in a moment.